The sirens cut through the rain like a blade. The gurney burst through the sliding doors, wheels screaming, plastic flapping like a broken sail. And in the center of it, a woman's chest didn't rise. 46, female. Found unresponsive in a car outside. No pulse on arrival. Compressions in progress. The paramedic's voice was steady, but his eyes flashed the truth. This one was close. Clara Ray's night shift charge nurse, hair twisted into a knot she'd redone 3 times since midnight, pulled the gloves tight until they snapped. The fluorescent lights painted everything a tired, surgical white. It was 2:11 a.m. The ed was full, the board was screaming red, and the sky had been hurling water at the city for hours. On the woman's wrist, a sapphire bracelet flashed blue with every pump of the medic's hands. On her neck, a delicate chain, a small gold lark, wings frozen mid-flight. The doors burst again. A man in a silk suit shoved past 2 security guards as if the clinic were his living room. "Move. That's my wife." His voice carried money and the habit of being obeyed. Adrian Cole. Clara recognized the face from billboards and business sections. Cole Dynamics, the kind of conglomerate that could buy entire floors of a hospital and name them after virtues it taxed. He stood at the foot of the bed, dripping rain and fury. "Where's the doctor?" Clara didn't look up. "I am the nurse. I'm running the code until the attending arrives." "Step back, sir." "Lucas, bag." "MEI, give me a second large bore, right AC, EP is ready." "Rhythm." MEI said, glancing at the monitor that showed a slow, taunting line, "Electricity without a heartbeat. The worst kind, the kind you couldn't shock." 2 minutes on the clock, Clara said. "Switch compressors on my mark." Cole's voice sharpened. "No, where's the doctor? I want the doctor." "You have me," Clara said, hands already scanning the woman's chest, the cool rise of ribs under still skin. "Name?" "Mara," he said. It came out like he hadn't said it kindly in a while. "Mara Cole." "Time down." He blinked. "What? How long without pulse?" Clara asked, eyes on the monitor, ears on the ragged sound of the bag valve mask and the wet thump of hands on bone. 6 minutes pre-hospital, the paramedic said. "Another 3 since we hit the door." "EP in," MEI said. "Calcium drawn. Bicarb ready," Lucas added. Clara's mind moved 3 frames ahead. Cardiac arrest in a healthy mid-40s woman. No trauma. No obvious external bleed. What kills the heart by suffocating it from the inside? Tamponade, tension pneumothorax, massive myocardial infarct. Or the clot that stalked silently and then struck like a trap, a pulmonary embolism. She leaned to Mara's ear. "You're not alone," she murmured, because sometimes the body heard what the room forgot to say. Then to MEI, check JVP, to Lucas, ultrasound subxiphoid view. Cole stepped closer. "Listen to me. I want the best doctor in this building, now." "You have the best team in this room," Clara said. She felt the cold press of the ultrasound probe in her own hand before she realized she'd taken it. The portable screen bloomed in grayscale. She'd spent years stealing spare minutes to learn the images no one expected a nurse to own. The heart should have been a bright, muscular metronome. Instead, the chambers looked underfilled. The right ventricle, strangely strained, the movement fast but weak, as if the heart were pushing against a closed door. "Not tamponade," she said softly. "Our V looks big." "Meaning?" Cole demanded. "Meaning I'm thinking pulmonary embolism." She looked up, finally meeting his eyes. They were the color of rain clouds on stone. Had she been traveling? Long flight, any leg swelling, birth control. Clotting history, anything? "She runs our foundation," he said, which wasn't an answer. "We had a gala tonight. She didn't feel well. We left early." "Leg pain," Clara pressed. "Shortness of breath, fainting spells. Does she take hormones?" He stared at Mara like answers might appear on her skin if he glared hard enough. "I don't know," he said, bitterness leaking through. We haven't been, just fix it." "Compressions," Clara called. "Switch." "Switch," Lucas echoed, and another pair of arms took over the brutal rhythm of rescue. The doors opened once more. Dr. Lila Gose, night attending, swept in, eyes already reading the room. Behind her, Dr. Ethan Ward, senior resident, trying to look less tired than he was. "Report," Gose said. 46 female, unwitnessed arrest in vehicle. 12 minutes down. Suspect massive PRV dilated on bedside echo, hypertrophic LV filling, Lungs clear on auscultation, no tracheal deviation, no JVD, no external trauma. No obvious cause of P other than clot. Clara kept her words clean, precise. We're on our third round of EP. Ghost glanced at the ultrasound, then at Clara. A small nod. Good catch. Ward's gaze flicked to Cole and back to the patient. He mouthed, recognition sparking. Yes, Clara said, not bothering to lower her voice. Cole bristled. What does that mean? It means she's a person and we're trying to save her, Clara said. Then to Ghost. TPA? The room tightened around that single word. Tissue plasminogen activator, the clot assassin. The medicine you give when you believe a clot is killing the heart from the inside, and you don't have time to prove it with a CT scan, and you're willing to risk that the same medicine could make the brain bleed, the lungs bleed, any hidden wound bleed like a bad decision. Ghost pressed her lips together. The clock on the wall coughed time away. Rain cracked the windows with cold fingers. How long down total? 13 minutes, Clara said. Any contraindications? Ward asked. We don't know her history, Emmy said. Sir, Ghost said to Cole, any prior strokes? Recent surgery, bleeding disorders. He spread his hands, exasperated. She's healthy, he snapped. We own a wellness brand. Clara bit her tongue. Wealthy didn't equal well, and white-toothed ads didn't stop clots from forming in the dark. Ghost's gaze landed back on the ultrasound. On the screen, Mara's heart fluttered like a trapped bird. We're out of time. If it's a massive pay, TPA could give her a chance. Cole's jaw bunched. What does that mean for a chance? It means, Clara said, steady and low, without it, we almost certainly lose her. And with it, he said. We might still lose her, Ghost said, honest as steel. And there's a risk of catastrophic bleeding. Cole's eyes skittered over the faces until they landed on Clara again, as if drawn by something he didn't want to admit he saw. Calm, are you even allowed to decide that? He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Just a nurse. Clara felt the words the way you feel a bruise before fingers press it. She had heard it in boardrooms where they pitched patient experience like it was a subscription box. Heard it from specialists who breezed through rounds like tourists. Heard it from administrators who chased metrics like scoring would heal hearts. She had learned to let it pass through her like a storm through bare trees. She didn't flinch. Dr. Ghost will decide, she said. My job is to keep time from stealing more than it already has. Monitors bleated arrhythmically. The compressor grunted and counted. The smell of saline and wet wool and fear drew in and out like a tide. Ghost exhaled, decision solidifying. We push TPA. Ward hesitated. But the husband. Ghost's eyes cut to him. The patient is pulseless. This is a medical decision. Amia was already at the Pyxis. Tenectepla's ready. Hold, Cole said, stepping forward. I want a CD first. You can't use my wife as a experiment. Clara met him halfway, not in kind. We don't have CT in a code, sir. Moving her could kill what's left. We have a small window. He stared at the gold lark lying against Mara's cold skin. The world had asked him to sign things his entire life, checks, contracts, permission slips for risk. Now the thing he couldn't sign rubbed his nerves raw. Fine, he said finally, through teeth, do it. But if anything. Clara nodded once to Emiya. Dose in. Tenectepla's going in, Emiya confirmed, voice a thread pulled tight. They pushed the drug into a woman whose blood had stopped speaking. For a heartbeat, the room was a prayer without words. Another slam. Another second where the universe held its breath and refused to answer. Continue compressions, Clara said, and Lucas's shoulders lifted and fell with ruthless rhythm. The monitor watched, blinkless. The rain kept writing its own script on the glass. Seconds scraped by, then a flicker on the screen, VFib stuttering like a bad signal. Shockable rhythm, Ward said, startled hope cracking his exhaustion, charging to 200. Clear, Clara called. Everyone's hands sprang back. The defibrillator discharged with a sound that always felt like a door slamming in a house you thought was empty. The line bounced, then flattened, then trembled back into VFib's messy dance. Charge again, Ghost said. Epi ready. Charging. 200. Clear. As Lucas moved to resume compressions, Clara saw something under the chain at Murrow's throat. The gold lark caught light, tipped, and revealed a second tag beneath it, a thin steel disc most people never notice until they do. Clara slid a gloved finger under the chain and pulled the disc free. Stamped letters, tiny and stubborn, stared back at her. It wasn't a lark. It was a medical ID. Factor V Leiden. Hormonal therapy. DNR contact attorney. Her mouth went dry. Factor V Leiden. A genetic clotting disorder. Hormonal therapy, a known fuse, and a DNR do not resuscitate paired with a lawyer's number. Clara looked up at Ghost, then at Cole. He saw her face change and went pale. What is that? He demanded. Clara held up the disc. The whole room seemed to tilt, as if the storm outside had leaned its shoulder into the building. The word everyone avoided landed between them like a fragile, explosive thing. DNR, Ward echoed, almost a whisper. Cole's eyes flared. That's outdated. That cannot be. We updated it after her surgery 2 years ago. We talked about this. Do you have documentation? Ghost asked, voice suddenly a wire stretched over a canyon. In my office, he said. In a file. Not here. Clara's heart thudded once, hard. The code clock didn't care about legalities. The body didn't either. It wanted oxygen or it would leave. She looked at Mara, at the faint blue at her lips, at the small mole under her left eye that someone, once, must have kissed. The DNR disc bit the fluorescent light, throwing a cold glint onto the ceiling. Rhythm check, she said, because time was still moving and decisions were still required. 3, 2, 1 stop. P again, worse now, like a shadow of a shadow. May's eyes were on Clara's, asking silently, do we keep going? Ghost drew a breath that sounded like the beginning of a verdict. We have an ID tag stating DNR, without proof of revocation. Don't you dare, Cole said. The thunder outside stepped closer, as if it had heard its name. Clara felt the room pivot around her. The law said one thing, the medicine another, the marriage a third. And the woman on the table, voiceless, had once said something nobody here could prove she'd unsaid. Clara thought of all the modern ways a person could vanish while still being in the room. Grief, ego, fear, and the cold bureaucracy that arrived precisely when a heartbeat didn't. Her fingers curled around the metal disc until it pressed crescents into her glove. She made herself loosen her grip. She made herself choose the next right thing. Resume compressions, she said, and Lucas's hands obeyed because hands trained to save rarely stop when there is the faintest chance the next breath will matter. Ape, Ghost said, voice sharpening with the only mercy she had action. Consider repeat dos TPA. Clara leaned close to Mara's ear again and said the thing she always said when the room forgot the human at its center. You decide, Mara. If you want to stay, take my voice as a rope. The monitor line trembled. The thunder rolled. The lark pendant lay still against skin cooling under hospital air. Charging, Ward said, almost to himself, as if saying it might conjure an answer. 200. Clear, Clara called, and her voice didn't shake. The paddles kissed the chest. The shock tore through the quiet and left the room listening so hard it hurt. For the briefest moment, a shape appeared on the screen, a hump, a wave, the suggestion of a rhythm rising from a flat sea. It disappeared. Clara felt every pair of eyes turn to her, the person the husband had first dismissed and the room had silently elected to follow. She stared at the DNR disc and the lark pendant, 2 stories hanging from one chain, and made the kind of decision that would haunt or heal. We go again, she said. The second shock hit, and for a heartbeat, the world forgot its rules. A blip appeared on the monitor, faint but alive, a rhythm fighting through static. Clara leaned closer. We have something. Weak, but there. Dr. Goz's eyes flicked to the monitor. Sinus rhythm. Check pulse. Lucas pressed fingers to the carotid. Faint, but present. The room exhaled all at once, exhaustion, disbelief, relief. Adrian Cole didn't breathe. He stared at the chest that had been still minutes ago, watching it rise shallowly now, almost afraid to believe it. She's alive, for now, Clara said softly. Her voice carried the weight of both miracle and warning. We'll stabilize and transfer to ICU. The rain outside slowed, as if the storm itself paused to listen. Emiya adjusted the oxygen line, pressure 60/40. She's hanging by threads. Keep fluids going. Warm blankets. Prepare the dopamine, Clara ordered. Her hands never stopped moving, checking lines, securing tubes. She's not out of the woods. Cole hovered uselessly beside the bed, water dripping from his sleeves. She had a DNR, but she didn't mean it anymore. We talked about it. Clara looked at him without accusation. Then bring the paperwork. We'll add it to her record. He hesitated. It's not digital. It's in a file. At home. Her silence said everything. In emergencies, law and morality often stood on opposite sides of the same line. Dr. Ghost finally spoke. We'll review it later. Right now, she's a living patient. That's our responsibility. Cole nodded weakly, whatever it takes. As the team wheeled Mara toward the ICU, Clara walked beside the bed, one hand lightly on the rail. The hallway lights hummed overhead. On the wall, posters about patient compassion and excellence in care glared under fluorescent glare, slogans she'd memorized but never trusted. They reached the elevator. The door closed with a sigh. The storm sound faded, replaced by the rhythm of the ventilator, the quiet beat of survival. Cole stared at the numbers climbing above the door. You didn't hesitate, he said quietly. I don't get to, Clara replied. Not when seconds decide who lives long enough to regret. He looked at her, the woman he'd called just a nurse, and found no arrogance left in him, only confusion and the cold tremor of fear. I didn't even know she was sick, he said. Sometimes they aren't, Clara said. Sometimes it's just one clot, one flight, one wrong day. Her voice was gentle, but the truth in it was heavy. When they reached the ICU floor, the lights were warmer but quieter, muffled by layers of exhaustion and antiseptic air. The monitors clicked back to life. The ventilator hissed. BP still low, Amia murmured. She's fighting. Keep watching for signs of bleeding, Clara said. TPA can turn a rescue into a tragedy. Cole stepped closer to the glass, watching his wife, pale, intubated, unrecognizable under tubes and tape. You think she can wake up? I think she made it this far for a reason, Clara said. He swallowed hard. You saved her. Clara didn't answer. She only looked at Mara and thought of the DNR tag, of the silent wishes the living often ignore because hope feels more comforting than truth. The elevator doors opened again. Dr. Ethan Ward stepped out, holding a tablet. CT confirms it, he said. Massive bilateral pulmonary embolism. You were right, Clara. Ghost nodded, half smiling. Good instincts. You bought her time. Cole's gaze darted between them. Bought. Clara turned to him, her voice steady. We don't know what damage was done while her brain was without oxygen. It's too soon to say. He stared through the glass. She was supposed to speak at a conference tomorrow. She hates missing things. Clara's tone softened. She can rest now. You both can. But she didn't rest, not that night. Mara's heart kept fighting, and somewhere inside that fragile pulse, something else stirred, something the machines couldn't measure, a spark that refused to die. Clara stayed by her side long after the others left, listening to the rhythm that shouldn't have returned. She wasn't sure if it was courage, coincidence, or something the textbooks never explained. Outside, dawn crept in, pale and uncertain. Inside, the gold lark pendant rested against a chest that finally moved on its own, faint, but alive. Morning came with a pale, gray light that made the hospital look softer than it was. The chaos of the night had dissolved into quiet, that strange calm that follows when everyone has survived, but no one is sure what it means yet. Clara stood by the glass wall of the ICU, watching the steady rhythm on Mara's monitor. The numbers blinked with stubborn consistency: heart rate, oxygen, pressure, the fragile vocabulary of life borrowed back from death. Adrian Cole sat in a chair beside the bed, elbows on his knees, staring at his wife as if she might open her eyes if he just looked long enough. His expensive watch ticked too loudly for the silence. She's stable for now, Clara said softly. But we don't know the full extent yet. He nodded, eyes hollow. You mean, brain damage? She hesitated, not to soften the truth, but to measure it. She was without a pulse for 13 minutes. Sometimes people come back whole. Sometimes they don't. His hand trembled slightly. I used to think money could fix anything. Build hospitals, fund research, name wings after us. And now I'd trade all of it just to hear her say something. Clara didn't respond. She had heard versions of that confession before, the moment when power ran into the limits of flesh. Dr. Ghost entered quietly, holding a clipboard. CT shows no major hemorrhage from the TPA. That's good news. Cole looked up. So she wake up, Ghost sighed. Her brain activity is minimal but present. We'll keep her sedated for now to help her stabilize. When the doctor left, the room fell back into silence. Cole leaned forward, whispering, she hated hospitals. Said they smelled like endings. Clara checked the 4 pump. Then maybe today, it smells like another beginning. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. Why did you keep going? Clara frowned. What do you mean? The DNR, he said. You saw it. You could have stopped, but you didn't. Clara met his gaze, weary, calm, because sometimes people write those things when they're afraid. And sometimes they change their minds but forget to change the paper. In that moment, she didn't look ready to leave. He studied her face, searching for something he couldn't name. And what if you were wrong? Then I'd rather live with the guilt of trying than the certainty of giving up, she said simply. For a moment, he had no reply. Outside, the rain had stopped. Light spilled across the floor like a fragile truce. Hours passed. Nurses changed shifts. Machines hummed. Time stretched. Then, near noon, Clara returned to check vitals and saw something she hadn't before. A twitch, barely a flicker, but there. Mura's fingers moved. Doctor goes, Clara called softly but firmly. The doctor came running. Cole stood instantly, eyes wide. Mara. His voice cracked like it hadn't in years. The doctor leaned in, checking the pupils. She's trying to come through sedation. Reflexes returning. Cole took her hand, his own shaking. Can she hear me? Clara nodded slightly. Sometimes they can. Talk to her. He bent close. Mara, it's me. You're safe. You're here. Her eyelids fluttered, a faint, impossible sign of response. The monitors kept their rhythm, calm and sure. Clara smiled faintly beneath her mask. She's fighting her way back. Cole's voice was barely a whisper. You saved her. No, Clara said, her eyes fixed on Mara. She saved herself. We just didn't stop her. Later, as the shift changed again and the world outside began to brighten, Clara walked to the window overlooking the city. She could still feel the imprint of the DNR tag in her hand, the cold metal, the weight of the decision she'd refused to honor. Was she right? She didn't know. In medicine, sometimes faith was the only thing left standing when science ran out of answers. And yet, as she watched the first rays of sun slide over the skyline, she allowed herself one quiet thought. Maybe, for once, mercy and medicine had agreed. Behind her, the monitor beeped steady and strong. The next morning arrived too quietly, the kind of silence hospitals wear after surviving something they can't explain. The monitors whispered their steady rhythm. The sun had pushed through the gray, pouring a pale light over the white sheets where Mara Cole still lay between life and whatever waited beyond it. Clara entered softly, coffee in hand, chart tucked under her arm. She'd worked 2 shifts back to back, but her eyes were clear. Exhaustion had no place when a life was still on the edge. Mura's vitals had stabilized overnight. Oxygen levels steady, blood pressure holding. Brain activity slow, but measurable. Cole stood by the window, phone in hand but unread. He didn't look up when Clara spoke. Her numbers are stronger today, she said. We might start easing sedation. He nodded, voice rough. Will she wake up? She's trying, Clara said. Sometimes the body just needs permission. He turned toward her, eyes hollow. I don't even know what to say to her if she does. We haven't really spoken in months. Clara tilted her head. Then maybe start with that. He almost laughed, the kind of sound that didn't know if it belonged to relief or regret. You're direct. Life's short, she said, adjusting the 4. I don't believe in wasting it on polite silences. The door opened. Dr. Gose entered, scanning the monitors. Good progress. Let's lighten the sedation slowly. As she adjusted the drip, the air in the room seemed to thicken, every breath carrying the weight of anticipation. Minutes passed like hours. Then, a flicker. Mura's eyelids twitched again. Her hand moved slightly beneath the blanket. Cole stepped closer, breath caught. Mara, her lips parted. A hoarse sound escaped, not a word yet, but something unmistakably human. Clara leaned in. Mara, it's okay. You're in the hospital. You're safe. Her eyes fluttered, pupils shifting under the light. The machines adjusted, a faint rise in the heart rate. Mara, it's me, Cole whispered. Adrian. Her gaze drifted toward the sound, unfocused but searching. She tried to speak again, voice rasping through the tube. Clara placed a hand gently on Cole's shoulder. She's trying. Don't rush it. Tears slid down his face, unnoticed. I almost lost you, he murmured. Mara blinked slowly, one tear tracing down her own cheek, a fragile bridge between silence and memory. Dr. Gose nodded softly. We'll keep watching her. No sudden moves. The brain needs time. As the doctor left, Cole stayed frozen, his hand still holding hers. The monitors kept their rhythm, steady, faithful, alive. Later, when Clara returned to check vitals, she found Cole still sitting there, head bowed. On the tray beside him sat his untouched coffee, gone cold. He spoke without lifting his eyes. You know, she used to volunteer at clinics. Said nurses were the real miracle workers. I didn't believe her until now. Clara smiled faintly. We just hold the line. The miracles are theirs to take. He looked at Mara again, her chest rising and falling with the ventilator's gentle rhythm. You think she remembers, maybe not the details, Clara said softly. But the heart remembers who stood beside it. Outside, the sunlight grew brighter, cutting through the last remains of storm. Inside, for the first time, hope felt like something they could touch. 3 days later, Mara Cole was breathing on her own. No ventilator, no tubes, just oxygen and quiet miracles. The ICU lights were softer now, filtered through blinds that carved stripes of gold across the floor. The room smelled less of antiseptic, more of coffee and relief. Clara stood at the foot of the bed, updating the chart, while Dr. Ghost finished morning rounds. Motor reflexes are returning. Memory seems intact, the doctor said. It's remarkable. Clara nodded. She beat the odds. When the doctor left, Clara turned to see Mara awake, weak but aware, her voice little more than a whisper. You're the nurse, she said. Clara smiled gently. Yes, I'm Clara. You were there, Mara murmured. I remember. Your voice. Clara hesitated, her heart tightening. Then you remember coming back. Mara's eyes glistened. I remember. Peace. And then, sound. You said something about staying. Clara froze. You heard that? Mara nodded faintly. It felt like someone calling me from very far away. From the doorway, Adrian Cole stepped in, still in the same dark suit, though now pressed and clean. The fatigue hadn't left his eyes, but something else had returned. Humility. Mara, he said softly. Her eyes turned to him, widening with surprise, then softening. Adrian. He moved closer, voice breaking. You scared me half to death. She managed a weak smile. That makes two of us. Clara quietly stepped back, giving them space. She'd seen too many reunions, some silent, some angry, some filled with words that came too late. This one felt raw, unfinished, but alive. I heard you, Mara whispered. You kept saying my name. I didn't stop, Adrian said. I didn't know if you could hear me, but I said it anyway. She looked at him a long time. You used to say my name only in meetings. He winced. I know. I forgot what mattered. Clara looked away, pretending to read the monitor, though she could feel the air change, that delicate moment when regret meets grace. Mrs. Cole, she said softly, I found your medical tag during the code. It listed AD in our order. I wanted you to know. Mara blinked, then smiled faintly. That's old. I wrote that after my mother's death. I didn't want anyone keeping me alive by force. Clara nodded. We didn't have documentation to confirm it, so we chose to keep going. Mara's gaze lingered on her. Then thank you for breaking the rules. Clara exhaled slowly. Sometimes the rules don't know the person. Adrian reached out, touching his wife's hand as if afraid she might vanish again. We'll redo everything. The DNR, the paperwork, all of it. Mara looked at him gently. Maybe what needs rewriting isn't on paper. For the first time, he smiled, tired, genuine. Then where do we start? She whispered, with remembering who we were before we forgot what mattered. Clara stepped back, watching the two of them framed in sunlight. For all the medicine, machines, and codes, sometimes healing had nothing to do with pulse or pressure. It was quieter, a return not just to life, but to meaning. Hours later, as she ended her shift, Clara passed the ICU once more. Through the glass, she saw Adrian still by Mara's side, reading aloud from a book, the lark pendant glinting softly against her chest. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, the city breathed. And somewhere deep in the hum of machines, a truth settled in Clara's mind, one she'd carry long after this case faded from the charts. They called her just a nurse, but that night, she'd been the difference between goodbye and one more chance to love.